So ever since the Celestial Discharge MCX got introduced to Path of Exile, I've had my eye on Discharge. And having played a few Ignite variations, I kind of got curious as to how far you could scale the actual hit portion of the Discharge skill. So as a little bit of an end league project, and with the help of a few people from my Twitch chat, we were able to scale the hit damage off of Discharge and achieve some crazy numbers. Hey guys, Sniz here, and in this video we're gonna go over the 33 charge Discharge Slayer that I played in Ritual League. Now, disclaimer, do I think anyone should play this build ever again? No, I don't. It's a bad build, let's be honest. It has extremely bad clear, it's very clunky to play, you die from anything, it's very squishy, and it is extremely expensive to set up. So why even bother playing it, right? Well, now, do I still think people shouldn't try this build? Yes, I still think it's a bad build and no one should play it. This whole project was a meme project to see what we could do with it, and I made a little montage about the build's performance. Link to that down in the description. I think it's a pretty cool video. And in that video, I promised that I'd make this sort of video where I just summarize what I did in that build. So this definitely isn't a build guide. This is more of a build summary to show you how I set it up. I still think no one should play this build ever again. Use this as a reference as to how strong Discharge can be, and then just trust me that it feels very clunky to play. Okay, let's take a look at how it's set up. So let's start off with the passive tree. Like the thumbnail says, and like I've also said, we are a Slayer. So we need to start out with the Slayer node right here. We kind of have a few wasted points because we don't necessarily want to be in this half of the tree. We grab jewel sockets wherever we can. We then move over and grab the window of opportunity for reduced skill effect duration. Now this is only so that we can change between the two stances of aspect of the cat quickly. This with replica Furl's Fur generates our frenzies and power charges, but we'll get into that still. So like I said, from here we just grab jewel sockets wherever we can. Then we grab a little bit of elemental damage right here. The ailments from this node isn't too important, because we don't do ailment damage with Discharge. Then right here we have our Lethal Pride to get Chainbreaker. Because this is League 3.13, and in any build that you want to push damage, you need to abuse Divergent Berserk. So this is why we use this to generate rage for Divergent Berserk. Then we just grab some life over here. Since we're using a staff, having crit chance and crit multi is very important because we do want to have 100% crit chance so that every single one of our Discharge hits is always a crit. So we gain crit right here, then we gain spell crit and crit multi right here. We grab some life, then we also grab a few reservation nodes so we can fit in all of our auras. We'll get to them in a second. Then we take overcharge for this +1 to maximum power charge right here. We gain elemental damage from this node over here, and we go for penetration instead of the effect of ailments. Then we just grab a little bit of life and we move over to this cluster jewel socket. We'll go over the cluster jewels in a second. Then if we move up to this part of the tree, we also have this cluster jewel socket right here. We have these nodes that increase our mana regen. That's not too important. And then crit strike chance per power charge. And in this setup, we have 11 power charges. So this is quite significant, and then also crit multi per power charge. So this is also pretty significant. But as you'll see, we don't take this node right here. Now this increases the number of minimum power charges that we have. Now unfortunately, Discharge can't discharge minimum charges. So gaining minimum charges is a DPS loss. It's weird how that works. Just remember, this isn't an important, you don't take this node because you don't want minimum power charges, we only want to scale maximum power charges. Then we just grab this life over here because it's nice and convenient to get. Another power charge right here, another jewel socket. Like I said, we want to go for crit chance and crit multi, so this is just more spell crit right here. A little bit of spell damage, cast speed and intelligence right here, and then just some life. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the base tree. Okay, for the cluster jewels, let's just start off on this top cluster right here. We start off with Prismatic Heart, since 30% increased elemental damage is just a nice chunk of elemental damage, and the all raise is also nice. Then we gain corrosive elements. Now, this is an interesting one because it gives us 25% chance to apply cold exposure, fire exposure, and lightning exposure on hits. From cold skills, fire skills, and lightning skills. Now, Discharge actually counts as fire, cold, and lightning. So technically, Discharge, if you're very lucky, could apply all 3 exposures in a single hit. This doesn't happen too often, but that's why we take this node right here. Then for the medium, we have Master of Fear, just to unnerve enemies, so they take 10% increased spell damage. And then we also have Evil Eye. Now this blinds non-cursed enemies when we do curse them, but the main reason to take this one is just so enemies take 5% increased damage as well. Then if we move down to this cluster jewel right here, we have Widespread Destruction, 20% elemental damage, and a little bit of AoE. I mean, the elemental damage is self-explanatory, and the AoE is pretty much overkill, but it's a nice node to have. Then we have Prismatic Heart again for the 30% increased elemental damage and all res. And then another interesting one is we have Sadist. Now, as you can see, we gain increased elemental damage if we've applied one of the elemental ailments recently. Now, even though the Discharge that we use can't apply elemental ailments, we're still using Skitterbots to chill and shock enemies. So we don't gain the 20% increased damage from ignited enemies, but we do gain the 40% increased damage from chill and shock. Now, onto the jewels of this build, and these jewels are definitely one of the reasons that the build has the crazy amounts of DPS that it has. Now, these jewels were given to me by one of my Twitch viewers, Jackie, and he quit the league and he had a deep delver, so he gave me all of his gear, and in that tree or in his gear we had these triple crit multi jewels. Now, these jewels are crazy. This jewel right here gives us close to 50 critical strike multiplier, just from one jewel. Now, unfortunately, these do have mind throwing speed on them, not increased life, which would boost our maximum or our effective HP pool by about 1,000. But the point of this build wasn't to survive, it was to make sure that nothing else survives. So most of these have mind throwing speed on them, as you'll see. I think every jewel in this build looks like this pretty much, except for about 3. This one right here was just so I could cap my resistances. And then apart from this one, we have a triple crit multi right here. We have triple crit multi right here. 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 And triple crit multi right here with an implicit crit multiplier as well. And then we also have this one right here. So this is the Watcher's Eye that we use. Now, since the only really damaging aura that we use in this setup is Zealotry, these are the best 2 mods that you can get on a Watcher's Eye for Zealotry, and we have both of them on the same Watcher's Eye. And I think that's all except for the Lethal Pride that I've explained before to generate Rage. So let's take a look at the Ascendancies, and I think the main question I get asked about this build, apart from how much it cost, was why do we go Slayer? And the only reason to go Slayer in this setup is for this node, Masterful Form, that sets our endurance charges or our maximum endurance charges equal to our maximum frenzy charges. And since we're scaling power charges on the tree and with gear, and we then use a badge to increase the number of frenzies that we have, this then allows us to have endurance charges equal to our frenzies, and that is equal to our power charges. The rest of these Ascendancy nodes doesn't really help us out all that much. These 3 are just not bad. And then we also have Bane of Legends for the 20% cull. Now this might be seen as a little bit of a cheat right here, but I honestly don't think this cull procs too often. Like I said, our Discharge hits for about 130 mil up to about 150 if all the stars align. So I don't think we need the 20% cull all that often, but it's nice to have because it then still looks like a one-shot. So let's take a look at the gear, and I think one of the core features or the core pieces of this build is the replica Pharaoh's Fur. Now, this allows us to gain maximum endurance and maximum frenzy charges when we switch between Aspect of the Cat stances. Now, this is probably probably the 2 most difficult charges to gain, the frenzy charges and endurance charges, and this allows us to gain them pretty easily about once every 2 seconds and once every 1.5 seconds. So we pretty much always have 11 endurance and 11 frenzy charges thanks to the replica Pharaoh's Fur. Then we need a Badge of the Brotherhood. And the only reason I use a Badge of the Brotherhood is because it sets our maximum frenzy charges equal to our maximum power charges. And from gear and the tree, like I've said, we scale power charges to increase frenzies. That then, thanks to the Slayer Ascendancy, increases our endurance charges. Then we use Enya's Epiphanies. Now these boots we only use for the 25% chance to gain all of our power charges instead of just one power charge when we gain a power charge. So we use Stormbrand as our little power charge gaining mechanic, and then sometimes if you're lucky, instead of just gaining 1 or 2 power charges, you'll just gain all 11 of them thanks to these boots. Now unfortunately I wasn't able to get the Elemental Pen Enya's Epiphanies. There weren't any on the market at the time that I wanted to set this build up, and I wasn't in the mood to run lab myself to get the enchant. So getting the Elemental Resistance Penetration boot enchant would boost damage significantly, but I don't have it. Then for belt we just have a rare Stygian with a lot of dexterity. I have no idea why this one is Elder influenced. It doesn't have to be. This Stygian just needs to cap out our resistances and have a ton of dexterity. Then in this jewel I just have crit multi and a little bit of life. The rest isn't important. Then for the gloves we have Surge Binders corrupted with perfect elemental weakness on hit. Now unfortunately, as you can see, the increased spell damage per power charge isn't a max roll. It's only 4%, but we do have the 7% increased spell damage per elemental damage per frenzy charge. So we only gain from the increased elemental damage from frenzies. The increased physical damage per endurance charge doesn't do anything for us in this build. And then 4% increased spell damage per power charge is still good, but getting 7% here would be the better option. But when I made this build, I couldn't find a pair that had 7 on elemental damage and spell damage and 48% curse effect. But yeah, these are still amazing for a build that has 33 charges. Then let's take a look at the rings. Now these are pretty simple. These are not good rings at all. I just had them laying around. These rings legitimately just give us +1 to maximum power charges each. The rest of the stats on these are pretty bad. I only have them because they have a little bit of resistance as well. The best in slot thing here is to gain precursors emblems with +1 power charge, increased damage per power charge, and increased critical strike multiply per power charge. Now those don't exist in this league, and even just one with 2 of those mods costs about a mirror when I made this build, so unfortunately I couldn't get that one, but these rings still increase our power charges by 1. Then we take a look at the helmets. Now this helmet wasn't too difficult to make. I made this one myself. It has Berserk increased buff effect because, like I said, we abuse Divergent Berserk. Then it has Aspect of the Cats, so that we can switch between the 2 stances to gain all of our charges. And then it also has +1 to maximum power charges, and then just some life and resistance. The main thing here is just the power charges and the Aspect. Then onto the staff, and this staff, oh dude, I checked the trade site for 4 days straight to try and buy this staff. And on the final day, the guy came online and I bought this one for 120 Exalted Orbs, which I think is an absolute steal. Now, this staff has an implicit that increases on maximum number of power charges and endurance charges. Now, the endurance charges don't get affected by this mod, but it does affect our power charges. And then it also has the +1 power charge mod rolled on it as well. So this stuff right here increases our maximum power charges by 2. So it's pretty much what dual wielding 2 void batteries would do as well. But this one has crazy increased level of socketed gems. So the increased level of strength gems affects our empower. The increased level of end gems affects all of our supports and our discharge. And then the +1 level of socketed gems affects everything. +2 level of socketed supports pretty much just affects the supports and the empower. And then gaining 50% of our elemental damage as extra chaos is massive. As you can see, now bear in mind we don't have power charges. So just from the frenzies and the endurance charges, we're getting about 100,000 to 150,000 damage as extra chaos damage. Just thanks to that little mod right there. That's crazy. And this stuff then gives us a level 30 discharge. And that's why we have so much damage. Now if we quickly take a look at the flasks, as always I have my trusty reliable bleed removal instant life flask. And then we have an Atziri's Promise that gives us a percentage of our elemental damage as extra chaos damage. Now I only noticed now that this one is in a max roll, so we could still gain 2% of our elemental damage as extra chaos damage. And then we have our Bottled Faith. Now not only does Bottled Faith make enemies take increased damage, it allows us, or it gives us a truck ton of extra critical strike chance against enemies. And in a setup like this, where you just discharge once every like 5 to 6 seconds, you kind of want to have 100% critical strike chance, and this Bottled Faith definitely helps us out on that aspect. Then we have a Wise Oak for a little bit of elemental penetration. Now, as you can see, my resistances aren't triple balanced, so I'm only benefiting from 15% elemental penetration. If anyone were to ever do this again, and I've said this many times before, I don't think anyone should, triple capping your resistances could still give you 30% elemental penetration from just this flask, and that's a lot of damage. Then we have a Cinder Swallow because initially I allowed Discharge to ignite, but then I later on switched out for, I think it's Elemental Focus. Yeah, so we don't ignite anymore, but if you don't use Elemental Focus, you'll be able to allow, or this flask will let enemies take 10% increased damage. At this point, the flask is just a nice little bit of recovery when you're doing maps, and then also a fat chunk of increased critical strike chance. Okay, if we take a look at the gem links that we have, I think we start off with our Discharge. Like I've shown, we have our level 30 Discharge right here, thanks to the level 4 in power that gets boosted up to a level 8 in power. Linked to Awakened Elemental Focus Support, it's a level 5 that gets boosted up to a level 9 Awakened Elemental Focus Support. Then we have a level 20 Elemental Penetration Support. This could be upgraded to a level 21, and then it would be boosted to a level 25. We then have a level 5 Awakened Control Destruction Support, boosted to level 9. And we also have a level 20 Power Charge on Critical Strike Support, that could be a level 21, and then it would be boosted to level 25. But this was enough damage right here. So in our gloves, we then have a level 20 Flame Dash, linked to a level 1 Arcane Surge, just so we gain a little bit of spell, or just so we gain a little bit of spell damage, and mana regen. This could be a level 3 Arcane Surge, I think, and it would still proc quite reliably. Then we have the good old faithful Divergent Berserk. Now, the level of the Berserk doesn't matter all that much. The only thing that matters here is the quality of the gem. So we have a 20 quality Divergent Berserk linked to a level 4 Enhance. A slight upgrade here would be a 23 quality Berserk. But the level 4 Enhance is the max level that you can get. Or it's not the max level, it's just, it's what Enhance will give you in this setup. Then in our helmets, we have Less Duration and Swift Affliction. These two don't have to be linked. The only reason we have these is because we have our Aspect of the Cat in helmets. Now, as you can see, our Aspect of the Cat cycles quite quickly, but if we remove these, you'll see that it takes quite some time to switch between stances. And if it takes that long to switch between stances, if we discharge, we're stuck without charges for quite some time. So that's why we have both of these socketed in. Then we have our level 21 Vol Righteous Fire and Righteous Fire, since we use both in this setup. And then we also have a level 21 Zealotry. Now this is because of the helmet that increases our AoE gems by 1 level. So these two get boosted to level 22. Then in our boots we just have an Anomalous Skitterbots. Anomalous just gives Skitterbots more AoE. That's all it does. Linked to a level 4 Enhance and a level 12 Clarity. This is just to help us out with mana. I played around with the levels, but it seems that a level 12 is quite comfortable because you can, after discharging, you can still flame dash a few times. So that's where I drew the line. And then we also have a 20 Anomalous Flame Golem. This just increases the buff effect from Flame Golem, and Flame Golem gives us increased damage. Now in our chest piece we have our second 6 link, and here we have a level 20 Stormbrand linked to an Anomalous Power Charge on Critical Strike. Now all that the Anomalous version does is it increases the chance for enemies to gain Power Charge, or for you to gain a Power Charge when you Critical Strike an enemy with Stormbrand. And since we kind of want to gain all of our Power Charges as quickly as possible, we want to have as high of a chance to gain a Power Charge when our Stormbrand hits an enemy. So this is linked to a Swift Brand just to increase activation frequency, linked to an Awakened Hex Touch Support level 5, so we can apply an additional curse, And this additional curse is then an anomalous assassin's mark. This is for crazy crit multi, and also, since it's anomalous, cursed enemies take 8% increased damage, and this is thanks to another level 4 enlightened linked up to all of the gems in this setup. So on to the last few miscellaneous things. As always, pantheons that aren't upgraded. So we have Arakali. Since we don't really have offensive options for pantheons, just taking whatever is fine. I just have this for reduced damage over time, and like you see, nothing is upgraded at all. And then I also have Rizlata, so we can gain a few life flask charges in longer boss fights such as Cyrus, since we are pretty damn squishy. Then for our anoint, we just anointed infused, so we gained this extra power charge without having to spend all of the nodes to travel over here. And for bandits, I've killed all the bandits. So I've killed all the bandits for the extra 2 points. So just real quick, I want to show you the playstyle or the mechanic behind how the build plays. Now we're just in Blood Aqueducts. I know it's not a good place to show the power of a build, but like I've said, I don't want to convince anyone to play this build. I just want to show you the sort of playstyle. So we pretty much always have our 11 power or 11 endurance and frenzies, and then we use Stormbrand until we gain 11. Now that was really quick, and then we just discharge. Now as you can see, that's all it really is. And Discharge has a pretty long cooldown, so it feels really clunky to map with, because you can only damage enemies once every 2 seconds, and sometimes Discharge has this weird buggy thing where it just doesn't do damage even though it drops charges. And then on single target, you want to throw down everything. You want to pop your Vol RF, normal RF, flasks, and then you want to discharge. And that's the maximum, like 130 plus million DPS average hit right there. And that's pretty much the entire setup. I really don't think it's a fun build. I definitely didn't enjoy playing it, and I don't think anyone else should play something like this. Even if you just want a crazy fast boss killer at the end of the league, this setup is still so squishy that you can die really, really easily, and the damage is quite finicky. So I don't think this should be done. If you are interested in playing Discharge, Discharge Ignite is really nice, playing it as an Elementalist, or even something like a cost while channeling Discharge Trickster could also work really well. But that's it for this league's end league project. On that note, I have a cool league starting build guide coming up, and I also have a cool tips and tricks video for league start as well. So if you don't want to miss that, remember to subscribe. And if you want to take part in crazy projects like this, or just hang out, you can always follow the stream over on Twitch. Link in the description down below. And like I said, I did make a cool little montage video about this specific build, so if you want to see that, it's also linked down in the description. But that's it from me. I'm Sniz, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye. When he realized that you can have a fishing rod in PoE, he legitimately started to play the game just to get a fishing rod. And he quickly realized that you can't really, it's not very